Delton, 99 years ago. The hollow sound of demonic flutes rang out in Inferno's palace. Throngs of people filled the seats in the royal court, their eyes fixed on the royal couple standing before the throne. Black and light blue ribbons fell from the ceiling, symbolizing the merging of two kingdoms. We are gathered today for the marriage of Princess Zara of Escaton to King Delton of Inferno. An officiator's voice broke through the music. Delton stood at the center of the court in his royal uniform of a black long coat, black trousers, and several silver rings that embellished his fingers. The sky, visible through the domed glass ceiling, was black as always, but the profusion of lights made it look like day. Princess Zara wore his colors, black and gold. Her lace veil was parted to reveal an oval face, full pink lips, large eyes, smooth brown hair, and a body that was more curves than planes. She shifted her weight from her right foot to the left, struggling to adjust to the oppressive heat of Inferno. "We welcome all those who have answered the king's invite," the officiator went on, as he gazed upon the room filled with important people. The King of Terra smiled at him from the first row, while President Ogier of Escaton greeted him with a terse nod. Some would consider this the most important day of his life. He agreed, but not for the obvious reasons. Delton's gaze cut to King Elian of Escaton, Zara's father. He sat in the first row, wearing a deep frown. Today was the day Delton would take everything from him: his country, his daughter, and his peace of mind. Served him right for murdering his parents, for taking away the only thing he'd loved. Unbidden, his mind returned to that fateful night. The night his entire world shattered. Every scene, every color, and every memory was vivid. Vivid as the anger that burned through his veins. Delton knelt in front of a sharp sword pointed at his face, smelling the tang of iron throughout the royal court. His vision dyed in crimson. Blood. It was everywhere, splashed over the walls and the carpet leading up to the throne. The crown of Inferno lay at his feet, rubies and emeralds mirroring the body that sat a few inches away. His father, King Rayan of Inferno, had died with his eyes open. Someone had slit his gut open like a pig's. His white, fur-rimmed cape was bloodied. Stiff, unmoving fingers, still wearing those gold and silver rings, pointed in Delton's direction. His head had been severed. His head had been severed. A ruthless job. The killer had made sure the king would never rise again. Next to his father lay his dead mother. Her face was unrecognizable, splashed with blood. But it wasn't her who caught his eye. It was the woman next to her. So familiar yet so distant. Her dark brown eyes hit him first, making his breath stop. In them, he saw an expression that he'd never seen before. Hate. Karina? His lover's body was covered in black, the color of death. Delton's eyes flickered to her oval face, his gaze running up the narrow jaw and smooth, pale neck that he'd kissed only last night. He remembered her coming apart in his arms with his name on her tongue, how she'd said, "I love you," with a sincerity that undid him. However, the speck of blood on her cheek and the long sword clutched in her hand told a different story. There was no trace of gentleness in her voice as she said, "You're going to die tonight." "What?" Delton's tongue turned to cotton. Karina was his first love. He was going to marry her. This couldn't be happening. "Please tell me you didn't kill them. Please tell me this is all a lie." "Karina, I love you." She laughed. "Not even you are that naive, Delton." "Why? Why did you do something like this? You love me." She shook her head, and the hardness in her gaze made his blood curdle. "That's what I wanted you to think." His heart sank deeper when he met her gaze. He was aware of every sway of Karina's body as she moved into his orbit, circling him like a bird of prey. Her gaze didn't waver, meeting his in a direct, challenging stare. "You were nothing but a target." "Who are you, really?" he asked, the dread in his heart growing. "Someone who was born to kill you," Karina said. "Who made you do this?" he begged. "I know you'd never hurt me." "King Elian," she said, one corner of her lips lifting up in a smile. A golden ponytail gleamed behind her. "Hear me? King Elian of Escaton. Remember my father's name as you die." "Your father?" That word rang in his ears. "Yes, my father. Nobody knows we share the same blood. I'm illegitimate, you see. With your death, he'll finally acknowledge me." She raised her sword, but before it came down on him, Delton spoke. "Stop this. You don't have to do this. I'll forgive you. I never loved you." She broke the spell with her harsh words. "I came here to kill your family, and now I've done it. It's what my father wanted. Soon Inferno will become his. Men are weak to love. I merely used this weakness against you." As Karina continued to reveal the truth, hope deserted his body. He couldn't believe he'd been nothing but a pawn in the power struggle between Karina's desire to be recognized and King Elian's quest for power. There were rumors of Escaton's resources being depleted, but Delton had never thought it would lead to the assassination of his father. "That's enough talk," said Karina, lifting her chin. "It's time to fulfill my duty." She drew up her sword, moving it in an arc as if drawing a crescent moon in the air. But her sword never touched his neck. Before it could, he was up and moving. Thanks to years of practice, Delton was quick on his feet. He used his distinctive magic, a touch that could drain life from any target. Though demons did not generally possess magic, he did as the ruler of the underworld. He grabbed the back of Karina's neck and summoned his powers. His magic found her pulse and launched its attack. She struggled against him, trying to backhand him with her sword, but he grabbed her, and the sword fell to the floor. He didn't need to fight. His magic ended her life. As he felt her pulse slip away, he turned her face the other way. He didn't want to hurt her. He didn't want to leave scars on her body. He didn't even want to see her face as she died. Fool that he was, he still loved her. When he felt her go limp in his arms, he pulled his fingers away. Inserting a hand under her arm, he gently laid her on the floor. Delton breathed unevenly, guilt clawing at his heart. He took a step back and surveyed the wreckage. Everything stank of blood and death. Shutting his aching eyes, he let all that Karina had said wash over him. Delton stood there for a long time, as the night turned to day. It was still dark when he opened his eyes, all tenderness gone. He felt empty, bleak, cheated. He had no idea how to go on. Everything that he held dear had disappeared in the blink of an eye. Through it all, two words echoed in his mind. King Elian. He would never forget that name. It had given him a reason to struggle through the pain, to live, to seek vengeance. Now, years later, he had fulfilled that promise to himself. His revenge had begun. "The first part of the ceremony is a recital of the terms of marriage," the officiator said, looking slightly uncomfortable. It wasn't customary to have marriage terms, but this was a political marriage. Then, we will proceed to the main part of the ceremony. As he droned on, Delton's eyes moved to Princess Zara, and he felt a spark of guilt, which he immediately tamped down. Zara had no idea that he planned to exile her once this ceremony was over. She looked incredibly young, which was unsurprising since she was only 18 in human years, much younger than his 30. Of course, his real age was 100, and hers was 60, something that was a result of them both being immortal beings. Upon marriage, the throne of Escaton will pass to King Delton of Inferno, and Escaton will officially become a part of Inferno, the officiator read. King Elian grew more and more uncomfortable with each word, but there was nothing he could do. Inferno's black flag hung next to Escaton's light blue one, symbolizing the union. Delton had been prepared to go to war, but the marriage was a better way of destroying Elian. This way, he could have everything the regent prized. Having no male heir, King Elian had little choice but to surrender to his demands. Princess Zara will become the Queen of Inferno. Zara's lips parted and he caught sight of them. Their eyes met across a table with two crystal goblets, and a spark of recognition passed through his body. King Delton will come into possession of all of Escaton's resources, and henceforth, other kingdoms will have to go through Inferno to seek permission to visit Escaton. President Ogier of Elysium immediately frowned at the pronouncement. The angelic kingdom of Elysium and Inferno had always had a strained relationship. In fact, the Millennium War between the two powers had concluded a year ago, resulting in the signing of a flimsy peace treaty. No doubt Ogier was here to perpetuate the farce of a successful diplomatic relationship. Delton, however, hadn't abandoned his ambitions to take over Elysium. We will now have the main marriage ceremony. At last, the reading of marriage terms was over. By the end of it, Elian's face was dark as a storm cloud. He wasn't the only one. A lot of political leaders were unhappy about Delton's conquest of Escaton. The atmosphere resembled a funeral more than a wedding. "Do you consent to wed King Delton, Princess Zara?" the officiator asked. Her eyes met his again as if seeking permission. He didn't answer her silent question. Yes. A chorus of relieved sighs followed her consent. Do you consent to wed Princess Zara, Your Majesty? Yes. The officiator didn't ask if anyone present objected to the wedding because Delton was sure everyone did. Good thing blessings weren't required in Inferno. Nobody would bless this ill-fated union. Once the marriage treaty is signed and the blood exchange ceremony completed, Princess Zara and King Delton will be bound in matrimony. Please drink from the goblets in front of you. There was a crystal goblet on Delton's side with Zara's blood, and one on hers with his. They'd have to drink it as part of the ceremony, cementing their eternal union. Marriages in Inferno couldn't be dissolved by the law, as once they exchanged blood, a person was considered part of another. Zara would always be his wife, for better or for worse. He gripped the base of the goblet hard, raised it to his lips, and consumed its contents in a single gulp. Zara's eyes widened, startled by the violence of his actions. When he stepped away, wiping his mouth, an ache gripped his chest. Hot flashes overtook his skin as he breathed in and out, trying to calm his body's violent reaction to her blood. It must contain her magic. It looked like his dark magic didn't mix with Zara's healing magic. Where his power destroyed, hers regenerated. She stepped forward, worry stamped on her face. His gaze fell to her parted lips. Are you all right? Her voice was deep, full of character, unlike anything he expected to come out of her mouth. Drink it, he said, clutching the edge of the table. With shaking hands, she raised the glass and swallowed. Her throat bobbed up and down as the blood went down, and he found his eyes riveted to the smooth column of her neck. Through it all, she continued to watch him, worried. If she knew what he planned to do with her, she wouldn't waste her concern on him. Placing the empty goblet on the table, she faced the crowd. Ignoring the violent sensations racketing his body, he took a step forward, extending his hand to her. When her cool, soft fingers brushed his, he felt a spark travel up his arm. Pasting on a smile, she turned to face the crowd. But before she could wave, he grabbed her hand and spun her around. Pulling her body against his, he inserted a finger under her chin and tipped her face up. Then he brought his lips to hers. He didn't know why he did it. Maybe it was because he wanted to get a reaction out of King Elian. Or perhaps it was because he wanted to kiss his wife before he sent her away. Zara's mouth opened under his pliant, kissing him back. When she writhed in his arms, he couldn't focus on anything but the feel of her lips. She tasted of roses mixed with a tang of iron and innocence. He lost himself in the kiss for a moment, hearing her soft moans. It had been so long since he'd been with a woman. When heat coiled around his belly, he knew it was time to let her go. Abruptly, he broke the kiss. The King and Queen of Inferno. The officiator filled in the silence. King Elian stood up, ready to murder him. That made him feel a glimmer of satisfaction. The other state heads tried to look as disinterested as possible, but the chorus of throat-clearing made it hard to believe. A chorus of lethargic claps rang out. He looked down at his bride, whose dark, unfocused eyes and swollen lips greeted him back. Zara was his. Forever.